Okay, good.
All right. Okay, we had 30 participants in our previous meeting. So Sipho and Sharon, would you mind if we give it another 2 minutes to allow everyone to join before we move on to our next question?
Was everyone aware, Genevieve, that the sort of links are staggered?
Yes, I did announce it in the group at the beginning of the webinar.
Okay.
All right, should we get going?
Yes, I'm just sorry, I want to apologize for not having my video on. I am somewhere in the deep windows, so network is quite an issue. So I have to stay with just audio.
Well, then a double thank you for joining us today, Sipho. That's great. All right, our next question is from Susan, and this is a question that I think maybe the counseling psychologist would get quite often is, how do you continue with your internship in counseling psychology after M1? Will you be guided towards your internships as part of your master's studies, or do you have to apply for them yourself?
I think I'll start, Sharon. Do you mind?
Okay.
That's a bit of a tricky one, actually. And I just have to be careful here. But firstly, it's not a yes or no answer because each institution is different. So some institutions have for a very long time had their M1 linked with their M2, which is usually your internship. So they have a designated, if you like, internship site. So they would encourage students to take up those internship sites because they have negotiated with those internship sites around what it is that is expected of students at M1, so that there's a little bit of a continuity. There's one university in particular that I know of where their M1 year and their M2 year is basically blended together, in the sense that the university still maintains most of the supervision when you do your internship. So you see, and then some universities, you do your M1, you find your own internship, and that's it. There are very few of those universities, but they are there. So it's quite a tricky thing that Susan's asking, because it's not always the case, but sometimes it is the case. Because negotiations between universities and internship sites can be quite a tricky little thing. This is for public universities. I don't know about private universities, but in public universities, that is often the case.
Okay, I'll just add to that. My experience has been that if you find your own internship, it is a very, very strict process, because it has to then receive the approval of the 𝑃𝑠𝑦𝑆𝑆𝐴. So my experience, most of the training institutions would prefer you to take up the sites that they have and not do the private training, because it may not cover the hours that is required. So for example, it's registered counseling, but at a place like Cornerstone Institute, part of your training is your practicum, where your hours and your exposure to various components that cover the scope have to be addressed. My experience had been that the well-known institutions do tend to have allocated sites where they have made arrangements with various supervisors to take charge of the practical or clinical training.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Leanne asks a question and a half. There appears to be a power struggle between clinical and counseling psychologists. Is my outside view correct? Is it historical, structural, or inherent?
Okay, shall I take that one first?
That's Leanne's first question. She asks a second question, but let's unpack that one first. Thank you, Leanne.
Okay, Leanne, and sadly, your outside view, there is some credibility to that. I'm not quite sure how it all came about, but there had historically been sort of a precedent being set that clinical is higher, more important. I'm not quite sure what the wording is, but the reality is clinical is just a different approach. Your focus area is different. I think where we did pick up a bit of difficulty is a few years ago, medical aids got hold of the word clinical psychology. So they wrote into their rules that they would pay medical aid rates if you were seen by a psychiatrist or a clinical psychologist. And I think that's where people then, and there is an ongoing battle, are medical aids paying? I personally have found that I have no problem with medical aids because I'm fully accredited. I've got my contracting license. I've got my CPD points. So every bill that I've ever submitted to medical aid has been paid. But I'm also very quick to realize that when I'm sitting with somebody and it's beyond my scope of practice, beyond my expertise and training, I'm very happy to refer to a clinical psychologist and a psychiatrist. So for example, if I've got somebody who needs to be admitted, my practice doesn't lend itself to clinic visits. Because I'm far more work far more in a school setting. So then I'm happy for the psychiatrist and with obviously with my client's consent and permission to rather refer to a clinical psychologist in that case. So yes, there is this discrepancy. So your objective picture there is sadly, yes, there is truth to it, but there isn't validity to it. It really isn't. It's a different focus area.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
just to add on to.
Yeah, so just to get, sorry, thanks, but just to give a bit more explanation around my question is, I had wanted to do counseling psychology in my applications for counseling. But the more I spoke to people, the more I was encouraged because of this this idea that you can do more as a clinical psychologist compared to a counseling psychologist. I'm finding myself going, well, maybe I should go into a clinical route, though I don't necessarily want to work in a hospital. So that's where it's coming from.
Yeah, okay. It's not that you can do more, it's that you do different. You do different. So in many of the institutions, the training is the same. For example, at Stellenbosch Clinical and Counselling in my year, we were sitting in the same class. So it's, you work differently, and your orientation to life is also slightly different if you're clinical as opposed to counseling. So clinical has to, you wear this cap of pathology the whole time, because that's you working so closely to the psychiatrist. What is wrong, what are the diagnostic criteria, what is not being met, whereas your counseling psychologist is far more what has worked for you, what has happened now that it's no longer working. So it's just your orientation is different. I think people who've been advising you have been speaking more from possibly the medical aid and the payment side of things, where some practitioners have experienced difficulty.
Thank you, Sharon. Sipho, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yes. Somebody has their thing unmuted. But just on what Sharon is saying, I mean, this is really important, and it's important because you hear students quite often, and I know even during my M1 year and prior to my M1 year, this has been an ongoing difficulty. Choosing a stream or I guess, or registration category is really quite important, at least for right now. So far as we have psychology right now, it's really quite important for you as a student to know what it is, or to have an idea of what it is that you want to do with this qualification. And choosing between counseling and clinical has proven far more difficult, because even at the level of the Health Professions Council, there's a struggle of what differentiates the two categories. And I understand for students that it's even more difficult if you are quote unquote outside the discipline and you are being asked to choose this, but the people inside the discipline are also having having trouble choosing it. But when somebody says to you, well, do clinical because you can do more, and the question is, more of what exactly can you do? And this is really, really important. So it's important to I would suggest to students that if you can, speak to people registered as counseling, speak to people registered as clinical, hear what they do on a daily basis and where are they doing it. Because what you have is that you have a lot of clinical psychologists who are also in private practice. So even though people say, well, I want to go work in a hospital setting, you have close to 75% of clinical psychologists in private practice. And that's not a clinical setting. And this is quite important, because this is sort of the tussle that you have to go through. And you have to go through this tussle yourself and have some level of clarity, because when you're sitting in front of a selection panel and you are being interviewed and the question comes up, the answer cannot be, I want to do more. At least that answer is for most people I've spoken to, they feel that's not an acceptable answer. You need to know what this more is. So I think on the basis of that, just be clear, Leanne, about what it is that you would like to do and what it is that is actually feasible, in terms of doing things. And I mean, this is a huge tussle. My PhD is actually partly on this topic. It is a really, really huge struggle, and I understand, but you have to be clear for yourself what is more that you want to do and whether that more is actually feasible in the greater scheme of things.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. And what I'm hearing from you is that you're saying rather go for or choose something that's more authentic myself, as opposed to applying what the rest of the world might be saying.
Yes, because things change and things will change. So the hierarchy that Sharon is speaking about might not exist when you are done with your M1 training, and then what? So you have to choose in that way. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leanne. Your next question is, what are the chances that the subsidies Sipho mentioned will be reduced due to the strain the pandemic is placing on government funding?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
Thought I'd ask.
Throw it out there.
I am not in the know, but it is, I mean, this is a very acutely difficult time for the world, especially in this country, with what they call the triple threat challenges that we have. So I don't know whether they'll be cut. I don't know whether they'll be extended as mental health comes more and more in the forefront in the aftermath of COVID-19. I don't know whether that would significantly impact an increase in numbers of students being selected for training. So it's not a cause and effect sort of thing. It's just one of the many factors.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Peter asks, what can I do to get into psychometry as my honours mark was too low for UJ?
If your mark is too low, because you've got so many people applying, I think one of the first sort of cutoff is the academic mark. It's only once you've gone beyond the academic mark that interviews and all of that comes. But if your mark is not good enough, you're not going to be invited for interviews. So I don't know if it would be in your best interest to then redo the modules that you didn't do well in. I don't know, Sipho, what is your take on that?
The issue of academic marks, and I think the person is asking specifically about psychometry. I'm not well versed on, very few institutions offer a sort of qualification in psychometry. But I mean, I think, Sharon, you've covered it in the sense that academic marks are usually for all institutions, really. They're the first thing they look at in the paper application. But it might be in your best interest to look beyond. And I say this to students. I've even had to say this to colleagues. Remarkably, it is in your best interest. For example, I'm from Joburg. I'm from Alexandra. I did my training at Rhodes. It is always in your best interest, especially if you can afford it, because application fees can get a lot, to apply to as many institutions as you can. You'd be surprised about the varying sort of academic mark entrance. Some universities want 65%, some want as high as 75%, others want 60%, and others actually don't. They say they want 60, but they don't care. They just want to see whether you are able to. They look at the paper application in totality. So apply to as many institutions as you can to give yourself a better chance.
Great, thank you so much. Our next question is from Anika. How would your thesis research topic work? For example, are you required to do the research topics that the universities do more often, like in research psychology?
Okay, Sipho, do you want to take that, because you are busy with your PhD, so maybe that's more up your stream?
Okay. The question again, Genevieve, it sounded two-part.
Is Anika, do you want to unmute yourself? There we go.
Okay. Hi.
Hi, Anika.
Hi, Sipho, how are you? Okay. So my question was, do you decide your research focus for your thesis in counseling psychology, or is it chosen for you by your supervisor that you get, or topics that the university is most interested in?
Well, I think that's actually a very good question, Anika, and the answer again is not one size fits all. In the sense that you may be assigned a supervisor when you get to the university. I know one university that does that, and when I say I know one university, it doesn't mean that I'm speaking about UJ, so that we're all clear. I know I'm in touch with a number of universities. But some universities might assign a supervisor, and supervisors often have an interest, right? So, for example, my interest is in higher education, curriculum studies, psychological praxis. So if I have a student coming to me and saying, well, I want to do research on trauma, I would have to see where that trauma fits into my current interests so that I can give you the best supervision possible for your theses. Because I can't just take you on, you do, for example, the psychology of soil erosion, if you'd like. And I have no idea what soil erosion is, and I don't even know what the relationship between psychology and soil erosion is. So I wouldn't be able to give you the best thing. So usually you would also be told at the beginning of the year or the year prior, after you've been selected, to approach a supervisor with a topic. So you look at the supervisor's interests and you approach them with a topic. This is good training for when you do a PhD, because when you do a PhD, you're expected to formulate a research topic, formulate research questions, approach a supervisor to say, I'm interested in doing this and this. This is how I want to do it. This is how it fits into your current work. So it's important, as I'm saying, apply to as many universities as possible. When you get accepted to universities, look at the different people in the departments, look at what their research is, and look at whether you'd be interested in in doing that kind of research. So when I went to Rhodes, my interest, which was transplanted into my PhD, there was nobody who had that interest. But they had one smaller interest at the time, which was in higher education. So we made that work. And that's how I got my thesis topic. So it's quite a lot of work, and it's not a one size fits all that, yeah, if I go to this university, I have to specifically do this kind of research.
Thank you so much, Sipho.
Can I just add there as well, from a practical point of view, from somebody who studied much later and who didn't go into academics like Sipho's, it's so important to actually choose a lecturer that you like, that you've got a good rapport with, and some of my colleagues had disastrous experiences doing their thesis because their connection with the lecturers just weren't there. So yes, you've got your field of interest, but I think it's also very important when you go to the university to immediately see which lecturer is one that you can actually work with, because that thesis takes a lot out of a person, and it's sort of on the side of your actual academic work. So the minute you get accepted, you almost start doing your homework in terms of who are the lecturers, who could I work with, who has a similar sort of orientation to what I have besides just your topic of interest.
Thank you, Sharon. Okay, we do need to move on to our next link. I have posted it in the chat. We do only have 10 minutes left, but we are getting more questions coming in. So if we can move on to the next link, please. I did put a message in the group. Has everyone received it? If not, raise your hand and let me know. And Sharon, it is in the 𝑠𝐴𝐴𝐶𝑃 WhatsApp group, so you can just click on that link. Okay, great. So I think I'll end the meeting now because there's only 2 minutes left in this meeting. I'm just going to quickly copy and paste these next questions. Okay, got it. Thank you, everyone. See you in a minute. Thanks so much. Thank you.